It is not widely known that there is a ninja who became a champion in the world's top MMA tournament. The basic knowledge of ninja introduced here will be limited to common knowledge in Japan, deliberately avoiding going too deep. When we foreigners hear the word ninjutsu, don't we imagine the martial arts and magic of Japanese assassins as seen in manga, anime, and games? Characters from picture books in the late Edo period, such as Jiraiya and Orochimaru, are still known today through their appearances in anime and the like. Speaking of anime, from the old Ninja Hattori-kun to Naruto, various ninja characters are well known, and they fight enemies using the combat techniques known as ninjutsu. This is generally how it is understood in Japan as well, but there is a clear distinction that it belongs strictly to the realm of fiction. When someone in Japan thinks about learning a martial art, ninjutsu is never considered a viable option. While there are places in Japan called ninjutsu dojos, most of them, in my experience almost all, are heavily geared toward entertainment for children or foreign tourists. Suppose you're speaking with a Japanese person who has martial arts experience, and the topic of whether you've trained in any martial arts comes up. If you respond with ninjutsu, most Japanese people will react like this. Or like this. That ninja existed in Japanese history is an undeniable fact, and although it's not widely known, there are several historical sites in Tokyo related to ninja. As the name suggests, a ninja is someone who conceals themselves. In modern terms, they were spies, and ninjutsu, as the characters imply, refers to the skills that someone who conceals themselves should possess. It is not directly related to martial arts. Let alone the summoning of giant frogs or the clone techniques seen in anime. Those are, needless to say, purely fictional. However, many of the weapons and tools used by ninjas in anime and games do in fact have real-life counterparts. Let's look at 5 examples of weapons and tools that were very likely used in reality. Because there are far too many theories and claims regarding ninjas and ninjutsu, we'll limit this list to items that are at least somewhat backed by historical documents or archaeological findings. Items that lack a reliable source. Personally, I don't believe the lack of a source necessarily means something definitely didn't exist, or have not reached a clear conclusion will not be discussed. Type: a dagger-like tool with a pointed tip. Made of iron, usually rod-shaped or flat. Usage: often thought of as a throwing weapon coated with poison, but it was actually a multi-purpose tool, used for digging holes, aiding in climbing as a weapon, or to pry open doors. More of an all-purpose tool than a blade. Evidence: archaeological artifacts have been found. Illustrated in historical ninja manuals such as the Ninjutsu Densho. Usage: used to climb high walls or rooftops. Designed to be thrown and hooked, with excellent portability. Evidence: diagrams of its structure and usage appear in ninja texts like Ninpaiden. Some physical examples still exist in local folk history museums. Usage: scattered on the ground to injure the feet of pursuers and slow them down. Made of iron or bamboo, designed so that a sharp point always faces upward. Evidence: found in battlefield ruins and ancient burial mounds from the Sengoku period. Sometimes excavated alongside samurai armor and weapons. Remember, back then, people's shoes were made from straw, making this weapon particularly useful. Structure: a weapon with a sickle on one end and an iron ball attached to a chain on the other. Usage: the iron ball was used to entangle an enemy's weapon, followed by a finishing strike with the sickle. It was particularly effective in tight spaces. Evidence: mentioned in ninja manuals. Existing examples can be found in museums. Usage: a tool attached to the feet to walk across water surfaces. It utilized buoyancy to traverse shallow water or marshes. Structure: a circular wooden frame with foot straps. Evidence: a design diagram appears in the Bansen Shukai. Several reproduction models exist today, though there is debate about how effective it really was. As for the ninja sword, often the first weapon that comes to mind when thinking of ninja, experts point out that due to its lack of curvature, its cutting ability is reduced, raising doubts about its practicality. Additionally, appraisers with long experience in sword identification say they have never seen a so-called ninja sword. Even the shuriken, a symbol often associated with ninja, is questioned by some experts in terms of whether it was actually used by ninjas. Moreover, many of the objects used as shuriken were not star-shaped, but rather shaped like small throwing knives. These tools and weapons are thought to have been used not for killing, but for the purpose of surviving and returning safely. While ninjutsu is not the same as martial arts, it's highly likely that ninja were not completely untrained in martial disciplines. They probably had a basic understanding of jujutsu and kenjutsu. That said, many ninja had other professions, such as farming, during times when they were not engaged in espionage. This raises serious doubts about whether they could have mastered martial arts to the same degree as full-time samurai. Whereas many martial arts are rooted in techniques designed to destroy the human body, ninjutsu refers specifically to the art of espionage, making its fundamental purpose quite different. Ninjas are said to have occasionally worked as temporary mercenaries in warfare, skilled in surprise attacks like night raids and dawn assaults. However, their core mission was to acquire enemy information and return alive with it. In daily life, they blended into towns and villages. Sometimes they posed as fortune tellers, other times as mountain ascetics or kamuso monks. Their methods, disguising themselves, slipping into enemy camps, and gathering intelligence, were the essence of ninjutsu and the very purpose of being a ninja. If a top-tier ninja is someone who gathers intelligence in secret, leaves no trace of their presence, and never reveals their name, then the fact that certain ninja are remembered in history raises valid questions about their authenticity as ninja. Moreover, from the perspective of a real ninja, spreading ninjutsu publicly would be an unforgivable act. However, if such dojos are purely for cultural experiences or entertainment purposes, it might not be an issue. That said, there are also dojos that claim to be the Xth generation head of a certain ninjutsu school, or to be teaching true ninjutsu as a form of martial art. Regardless of how long their lineage may appear, or how much so-called authority they claim, the core of ninjutsu is espionage, not martial arts. Dojos that teach ninjutsu primarily as martial arts therefore contradict the very foundation of what ninjutsu is. Furthermore, since the principles of ninja and ninjutsu include a strict policy of secrecy, the lack of transparency makes it easy for anyone to claim the title of headmaster or legitimate successor. Compared to other martial arts or traditional disciplines, the historical credibility and lineage of ninjutsu schools is extremely thin and highly questionable. To claim titles like Xth generation or head of the school implies a deep respect for tradition. But if that's the case, the foundational rule of secrecy should be honored above all. Publicly recruiting students and using the title for promotional purposes feels, to me personally, deeply inconsistent. Especially among dojos that claim to teach ninja or ninjutsu, the level of martial arts skill varies so widely from one school to another that generalizing is extremely difficult. However, there is a ninja who trained in Togakure-ryu ninjutsu and became a champion in the world's top MMA competition, the UFC. The first and second UFC champions were, as you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's Royce Gracie. At the third UFC event, a person trained in Togakure-ryu ninjutsu became the champion. His name is Steve Jenham. He was introduced as a police officer from Nebraska with a martial arts background in Togakure-ryu ninjutsu. Jenham participated in UFC 3 as a reserve. In that tournament, Ken Shamrock advanced to the finals but withdrew due to an injury. Jenham stepped in as his replacement, won the match, and became the champion. However, while regular participants had to win 3 matches to become the champion, Jenham joined the tournament partway through as Shamrock's substitute and won the title with just 1 victory. He calmly engaged his striking opponent in a clinch, took the fight to the ground, and maintained dominant positions throughout. Even when the fight returned to a standing position, he smoothly transitioned to mount and continued delivering ground and pound strikes until the match was stopped. Personally, I found it remarkable that in the early days of mixed martial arts, when many fighters were still trying to fight within the rules of their own martial arts styles, he demonstrated such systematic and well-rounded movement across all phases of combat. As a side note, before his UFC debut, Jenem held a black belt and was an instructor in an organization called Robert Bussey's Warrior International. Robert Bussey is said to have devised and taught his own unique form of self-defense inspired by Japanese Aikido and Ninjutsu. Among other mixed martial artists from the same lineage is Jeremy Horn, who has over 100 fights under his belt and has become a champion in various tournaments. What I had imagined as ninjutsu is something completely different, and I don't know to what extent elements of the Togakure-ryu were actually present. However, if this were a martial art handed down from Togakure-ryu ninjutsu, or even something that applied its methods of body movement, then it would mean that its usefulness has been demonstrated, at least in part, on the world's highest stage. Because there are no objective historical materials that can prove this, and due to the nature of ninjas and ninjutsu, it's possible that even real historical schools left behind no records. The Togakure-ryu is often pointed to as potentially fictional. But personally, I don't think ninjutsu that proves effective in real combat should be criticized as a martial art, even if it doesn't stem from tradition or history. To summarize my own view, I do find it odd to evaluate ninjutsu as a traditional martial art handed down since ancient times. But as a modern martial art, or a system of body movement within martial arts, I didn't feel it was something to be dismissed or treated as a gimmick. Japan B is a channel that randomly shares information about lesser-known aspects of Japanese culture, spanning across various genres. Japanese martial arts dojos exist all over the world today. Many parents choose Japanese martial arts as their children's extracurricular activities so that they can learn good manners. However, it is not widely known that dojos have their own unique rules. This time, we will introduce some of the rules of Japanese dojos. The following 15 are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Interpretations may vary slightly depending on the dojo or style, but I think they are generally as follows. He is in a photo with a lineup of distinguished figures representing the Japanese martial arts world at the time, including Kyokushin karate founder Oyama, his master So, Kimura Masahiko's master Ushijima, and others. Sawai has an incredible martial arts background, with a 5th dan in judo and a 4th dan in kendo and iaido. In his prime, Sawai fought an old man who was once praised as the best master in China and was defeated as if he were a child. Since then, he trained under that man and brought the martial art back to Japan. At the time, Kyokushin karate was the most powerful brand in Japan, but Sawai's students who learned Chinese martial arts from China fought against top Kyokushin fighters in a match with their faces exposed. Among them was Matsui Shoukei, the current head of the Matsui School of Kyokushin. The result was an unexpected development.
The Dai Nippon Butoku Kai awarded people who contributed greatly to martial arts. The lowest title is Renshi, but simply receiving the title of Renshi from the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai is proof that the person has first-rate skills in the martial art. The highest title is Hanshi. Some of the early Hanshi were real samurai just a few years before. We will introduce some of the Hanshi who possess top-class skills in each martial art, with a brief profile for each martial art. The Dai Nippon Butoku Kai was founded to bring together modern Japanese martial arts, promote martial arts, preserve ancient martial arts, integrate techniques with other styles of competition, and honor martial artists. During the Pacific War, it came under government control, but after the war it was dissolved by GHQ, who deemed its nationalism dangerous. What was the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai that led martial arts to a position unparalleled in other countries and developed techniques to an unparalleled level?
He is known as Mas Oyama, the founder of Kyokushinkai-kan. But he was the first to seek a path to mixed martial arts after the war. He was one of the first striking martial artists to adopt modern weight training. Many of the episodes in the manga based on Mas Oyama are fictional. He resonated with the ideas of General Ishihara, the mastermind behind the Manchurian incident. He learned karate from Cho, who later became a leader of Koreans in Japan, and he had close ties with the bosses of the two major Korean Yakuza gangs in Japan. It is not widely known that Oyama looked up to Kimura Masahiko, who was widely regarded as the strongest fighter in actual combat, as his older brother, that he had connections with Kimura Masahiko's teacher, Ushijima Tatsukuma, and elders of various schools of karate, that he studied under Yamaguchi Gogen, the de facto founder of Hondo Goju-ryu karate, that there was a feud between Kimura Masahiko and Rikidozan, who is said to be the father of Japanese professional wrestling, that he was the model for Ryu in the video game Street Fighter, and that Kimura Masahiko witnessed Oyama in actual combat. It is no exaggeration to say that Kano Jigoro, the founder of Kodokan Judo, is one of the most important figures in modern Japanese martial arts. Nearly all Japanese martial arts have adopted a rank system, and nearly all Japanese unarmed martial arts require the use of uniforms, both of which were invented by Kano. By removing dangerous techniques from jujutsu and minimizing the time lost due to long rest due to injury, it became possible to improve skills in a short period of time, and it became a subject studied in schools. Although judo is an elite martial art, what is less known is that in the early days, students competed in inter-style matches against wrestlers and boxers from overseas, and that Kano himself competed in inter-style matches against jujutsu practitioners. When Japan entered the Meiji era, it actively adopted Western culture and aimed to leave Asia and join Europe, regarding the old and backward civilizations of Asia, as well as Japan's own traditional culture, as inferior. In the flow of this movement, Japanese martial arts once fell into decline. However, with Japan's victory in the First Sino-Japanese War, the ideology of enriching the country and strengthening the military gained momentum. As a result, the Dai Nippon Butokukai was established to gather and unify the various schools of Japanese martial arts. Japanese martial arts were revived once more. As Japan plunged into the Pacific War, the Dai Nippon Butokukai was placed under government control and began to strengthen its role in supporting the war regime. It was during this very time that a high-ranking member of the Dai Nippon Butokukai contributed an article to the organization's official publication, Butoku. From this article, we can clearly see the attempt to spread the influence of martial arts to all Japanese citizens. But what was the government's intention at the time? How were Japanese martial arts utilized under wartime conditions, and what was expected of them? It is widely known among martial arts enthusiasts overseas that the Dai Nippon Butokukai, originally founded to promote and honor martial arts, was dissolved by the GHQ after the war. However, what happened between the lines of that history remains largely unknown. The contributions in Butoku offer insight into why the organization came to be dissolved. For those interested in Japanese military history and the history of martial arts, this is a must-see.